and welcome to another Lockdown Learning with myself, Paul Holland. You're here because you are a Latinist, a GCSE Latinist, and you would like to know exactly how those purpose clauses work with ut. Okay, so it might be worth mentioning at this point that for some reason the Romans had several ways of creating purpose clauses, and a number of those will appear in your GCSE language papers. So it is worth you recognising them, understanding how they're constructed, so that you can identify them when they do appear in a translation or a passage to be commented on in your exam. So there's obviously this video that you're watching now, ut plus a subjunctive, but you might also want to check out a couple of other videos that I've made called qui plus subjunctive and gerundive with ad. Both of those are about making purpose clauses, and they are worth knowing for your exam. So let's go right back to basics now and look at what a purpose clause actually is. We use them a lot in our own languages. They consist mainly of a sentence in two halves, basically. So you have a main clause, and then that main clause is followed by a purpose clause to explain the reason why you did the thing in the first place in the main clause. Let's have a look at this in action. Some very simple basic main clauses. I went to the library. We walked into town. Now, both of those are very simple, basic main clauses that show somebody who has done something. Now, to make them more interesting or to explain why you did a particular action, you then add a purpose clause afterwards. You then say why you went to the library. I went to the library, and what was the purpose for that? Why did I do it? Well, the purpose was in order to find a book on Latin grammar, for example. We walked into town, and why was that? In order to meet some friends. There's no reason why you can't begin with a purpose clause. You could say, in order to meet our friends, comma, we walked into town. But generally in the GCSE exam, they'll start with the main clause first. Now, watch out, because in English we can simplify these to just the word to do something. So I went to the library, not in order to find a book, just I went to the library to find this book. Or we walked into town to meet some friends. Now, obviously that does just look like an infinitive, doesn't it? It just looks like to meet, to find. But actually it has more weight than that, if you like. In English, it actually has a purpose clause element to it, and it's hidden in the English. In the Latin, it's not. It's very clear. This is the reason that we did something in the first half of the sentence. Good. So now that we've seen what a purpose clause is, let's have a look at them in context, in a Latin sentence. Here's a nice straightforward one. The boy walked up to the temple in order to look at the statue. And you can see immediately that it's in two halves. There's the comma. You'll generally get a comma, but not always. But you've got this word ut, which is really important. That's the pivot moment. So I tend to tell my students to put a vertical line just in front of it so that you can see there's definitely two halves to this sentence. The main clause is nice and straightforward. It's in the past tense. At GCSE, when they do purpose clauses, they always give you them in the past tense. Okay, so the boy walked to the temple. Then we've got this new word ut. And ut can mean lots of different things in Latin, but here we'll translate it as in order to, or so that. And then we've got so that he can look at the statue. Now, one of the things that you'll notice here is that verb at the end. It's in a different form from normal, and this is called the subjunctive. Now, the subjunctive is not a tense, it's a voice, and a number of modern languages also use the subjunctive. A subjunctive is a form of a verb in whatever tense it could be. So here are just a few verbs here in their normal indicative tense. The indicative means it definitely happened. It's fact. But they also have forms that could be a subjunctive form, and that means that it's not quite fact. There's a little bit of doubt hanging over it. We're not quite sure whether this has happened or whether it will happen. And because of that, in English, we tend to use the word might or may, or it could happen. She could see something. He might go somewhere. And because of that element of doubt that you have in the subjunctive, that's why these verbs are used for purpose clauses. You don't need to know much more about the subjunctive than that, actually, not for GCSE. But in terms of purpose clauses, I think you might actually see why the subjunctive is quite a good voice to use for these sentences. If you go back to those very first ones that we looked at in English, I went to the library in order to find a particular book, but I don't know if I did find it or not, or you don't know whether I was successful. So there's a little bit of doubt. I went to the library, I was looking for this book, but I've not told you whether I found it. We walked into town in order to meet our friends, but there's no proof at the end of the day whether we actually did find them or not, whether we met up with them. So that part of the sentence is in doubt, and for that we need a subjunctive. Let's look again at this Latin example. The boy, he walked up to the temple. He was intending to look at the statue, but there's no more proof in the sentence at all as to whether he actually found the statue and looked at it. So there is some doubt over this. And for this, we need to use the subjunctive. Thankfully, the subjunctive is incredibly easy to form. It's very straightforward to recognize. Here we are. Here's the verb that you saw in the sentence. And you might recognize that it looks basically like the present infinitive. That's the normal, most common infinitive that you'll have studied for ages in Latin, the ones that end with are or ere or ire. Those infinitives, you simply need to take that form and put these endings on the end. And they translate into something like this in English. So that I could look at or might look at. So that you could look at, etc. All the way down. So there's that sentence again, and you can see exactly how it works. He walked to the temple so that he would be able to look at, so that he might be able to look at the statue, but we don't know if he did. This kind of construction also works quite nicely if you have somebody else being intended to do the action. Let's have a look at, for example, a sentence like Caesar sent a messenger to kill the king of the Gauls. And here, if you look at the subjunctive, it means so that he could kill the king of the Gauls. Probably the messenger, actually, because he's the one who has been sent in order that he should go and kill the king of the Gauls. If we make this plural, Caesar sent some messengers, then you would want to change that into the plural so that they could kill the king. And then you would have necarent. So subjunctives will always look like an infinitive with one of those simple, very, very familiar endings on for you. And that extends into infinitives which are quite strange looking as well. Do you remember those 7 or so irregular verbs that you've learnt? Some of them have quite strange infinitives. So here we are. Here's one for you. Esset is simply a T stuck onto the end of esse, which you'd recognise, to be, and you could have a sentence like this. The woman lived near the sea in order to be happy. Now, there's also the small matter of negative purpose clauses. All the ones that we've done so far have been positive purpose clauses because we've done something in order that something else should positively happen, if it can. But these following ones are ways of saying that you've done something in order that something else doesn't happen, okay? I've decided to do this so that somebody doesn't do something else. You can translate these with a very old-fashioned English word, which is lest. So lest we forget, so that we don't forget. Or you can just translate it so that we don't, or so that he didn't, or something like that. Let's just look at a couple of examples. The thing that you'll notice here is that they don't use the word ut anymore. They use the word ne, N-E. There it is, N-E plus subjunctive at the end. So you've still got that construction. So this one here means the leader hid the money so that his soldiers wouldn't steal it. Or you could say in case his soldiers stole it, but probably better to get that sense of purpose so that they wouldn't do something. So now this last one that I've given you is not simply a negative. You can see the ne there, but I've also given you the verb at the end. It's not just an active, imperfect subjunctive, it's a passive. So it's got that "are" on the end. So that it's not that it wouldn't read something, it's so that it wouldn't be read. That's passive. One final detail which is worth thinking about is that these often do look quite similar to result clauses. Result clauses also use ut with a subjunctive. So why not check out my video on result clauses as well, so that you can see the difference between purpose and result clauses. Good, there we are. That is, in a nutshell, how to recognize purpose clauses when they've used ut and a subjunctive. If that was useful for you, then please like and please subscribe to the channel. There's plenty of other things here for you to find if you're interested in brushing up on your Latin, making sure that you're getting ready for those GCSEs, or indeed if there's anything else in some of the other playlists that I've created, some for modern languages and other things based around ancient history and history of art. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that. I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.